Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Always good to kick off a very big day of news with a good old-fashioned YouTube encoder slip. So a huge thank you to the individuals making servers out of spaghetti. Really appreciate it. Let's dig into some of this news that we're shoving in your face this afternoon. The Department of Homeland Security partial government shutdown appears to be, and again, the key word is appears to be, on its last legs as the House of Representatives passes the latest Senate measure. Now, there are a lot of people already that are very, very upset at Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, for caving to Democrats' demands here. So before you make your ruling or judgment, let's actually hear from the Speaker of the House taking this bill over from the Senate.
We got the budget resolution passed. This is very, very important because that will ensure that border security and immigration enforcement will continue today and well into the future, despite Democrat attempts to reopen our borders and protect criminal illegal aliens from removal. The net result of passing our reconciliation bill is that ICE and CBP are funded for 3 years, and Democrats got absolutely nothing for their political charade and shenanigans out of that.
Okay, so a couple of things can be true at once here. There are a lot of people that are very grumpy, rather upset, because after all, if this particular bill does not include inherently in this DHS measure funding for ICE and Border Patrol. However, not only is ICE and Border Patrol already funded, but there is a second reconciliation package which Republicans don't need the Senate for, or the Democrats for, in the Senate to get this through. There's also something else that's important to remember here. This is about the 13th or 14th bill that Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has pushed out of the House to the Senate for them to pass. So not this one, because he was confirming the Senate's revision and amendments on this side. The man has put forward a ton, and I do mean a metric ton of legislation heading over to the Senate. And again, Senate Majority Leader John Thune made the decision at the time not to break the filibuster, not to move forward with actually getting the legislation through, but essentially just kind of hoped and guessed and wished that we were going to see the Senate actually get things through at a normal time and the Democrats would cave. And they sort of caved. But on the flip side of things, we didn't actually see the Democrats come to the table either. And that hurt the Democrats in the polls, but it also didn't really benefit the Republicans in the polls. So now this heads to the president's desk. And that brings us over to some of the other bigger news of the day. So first and foremost, a couple of key details on a series of major FBI raids. So the Federal Bureau of Investigation has engaged in a series of raids in the state of Minnesota, northwestern Indiana. We've also seen a series of a smaller raid out in Albany, New York, as well as in some of the tribal lands in the American West, and then internationally in conjunction of all two countries with China and India. So there's some really bizarre things happening right here, right now that we've never really seen before in a series of FBI raids. So let's actually dig in to what those are, what those aren't. You have some footage that we've seen over the last couple of days with the Federal Bureau of Investigation conducting a series of raids in Minneapolis, really wholly focused around engaging in a series of fraud allegations and evidence that has been sent over from independent journalists like, of course, Nick Shirley, earlier Minneapolis Star-Tribune reports, whistleblowing reports from the Minnesota State Legislature, also, of course, from a series of disturbing allegations from individuals like Representative Ilhan Omar's office and the magical mystery funds that went from $30 million to $18,000 and the disappearing winery in California. So a lot of different agencies are going through the effort of submitting all of these evidences to the Department of Justice. And it just so happens that under a month after Attorney General Pam Bondi was replaced by Acting Attorney General, the former Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, we now see a series of raids where the FBI is going in and saying, hi, we happen to notice that you have this daycare. And this daycare doesn't have any kids here. It's a little weird, a little bizarre, a little strange. Would you like to answer a couple of questions? Because we also noticed 5 minutes ago you were a vape shop, and then after you were a daycare and got all of that grant money, Then you turned around and decided you were a Medicare facility, then turned around and decided you were a dirt and bean dispensary, then turned around and decided, so the FBI entered into a couple of Minneapolis businesses. Now, it's also notable that this is the very last time we're going to hear from Governor Tim Walz giving a State of the State address in the state of Minnesota. So you may remember that Governor Tim Walz was running again for governor, and then it turned out that a lot of these fraud allegations and a lot of other really just consistent, awful governance allegations against his office made him such a sour, disgusting taste in the mouths of Minnesotans that this man had about as great of a path to being governor as Eric Swalwell of California. So Tim Walz announced he was no longer going to be seeking re-election, and he gets up in front of everyone to give this big, huge State of the State address, and seems like he's almost going to mention these raids around Minneapolis, because again, this is the stuff that I'm told, and you were told was being real super duper, super spooky to people in Minneapolis. I mean, they see a federal agent and then they just go into a panic attack. Their spleen falls out. I guess because everyone in Minneapolis is illegal or something. So Governor Tim Walz decides after, again, the FBI's raids appear to be more linked towards the record level of fraud that Governor Tim Walz has presided over, he decides to pivot into Old Faithful. So what's Old Faithful? Well, for Chuck Schumer, Old Faithful is talking about Jim Crow. It's Jim Crow 2.0. But what is it for Tim Walz? Well, for Tim Walz, the Old Faithful is there's attacks on transgenders and the LGBTQ. Here's Tim Walz, Minneapolis. He says the attacks are everywhere.
And our trans friends and neighbors are facing an all-out assault on their simple right to exist.
From whom? Where? Where are these assaults coming from? What is he referring to? The Supreme Court of the United States this week confirming the stay that said, you only can be man or woman on the passport, a critical piece of documentation. Is this what we're all up in arms about? Or sorry, is that ableist to say up in arms?
But here in Minnesota, we've instituted protections, including the right to gender-affirming care, because we're a place where everyone belongs.
And then the sign, the ASL interpreter over there is trying to communicate to the person in the crowd to either steal third or look under the mystery box. It's exciting stuff. And all of the standing and the cheering and oh, he's so brave and wonderful. We got out on social media. He tried to do some of the same routine. He did. He got out there and thought, as Tim Walz, I know what I got to do here. I got to get out here. I got to get ahead of these allegations. And I got to get out there and say, I'm Tim Walz. And so he tries to take credit for the FBI raids on major issues of fraud, which, by the way, we should point out here yet again, does in fact affect those in Minneapolis as citizens, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Democratic Socialist, Libertarians, that guy from the rent is too damn high party. I mean, all individuals are in fact affected when the services you pay for are instead embezzled. Can I get a Sherphilus McCormick in Florida? When you embezzle those funds from an agency, be it state or federal, it just so turns out that hurts everybody. It does. I don't like paying taxes towards services that I think are misappropriated or misused. But if I have to pay taxes, if I have to do this, well, then I at least want what I am paying into the system to go towards what I am told it is paying for. You know what I'm saying here? So this is what Tim Walz did. He decided to get out a couple of days ago and take credit for these raids. So he gets on his Texas Tim Walz here. He says, this town ain't big enough for two of us kind of thing. He goes, if you commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to get caught. It may not be today. It may not be tomorrow, or it may not be for 10 years while I'm governor. But, and that's exactly what we saw today. We catch criminals when the state and federal agencies share information. Joint investigations work, and securing justice depends on it. And this rightfully annoyed a lot of people. By the way, including a few out there, the very last remnants, all three of the last remaining moderate Democrats in this country, who said, Tim, you would have been able to say this if you would have had state agencies of law enforcement. You'd have had the state treasurer's office. You would have had the state auditor's office. You would have had perhaps the legislative examination committee in Minneapolis. Maybe you might have had the Minnesota State Patrol, working with federal law enforcement. If you would have had them doing the working together, well, then you would get together and play the big whole, unity Care Bears. It's better when we work together kind of a thing. But I'm afraid that this man is not Mr. Rogers. It's not all about unity because that Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, his attorney general, forbade any Minnesota office, local or at the state level, from working with the federal government. So that leads us to to today's raids by state and federal law enforcement, which, by the way, to be clear, the FBI showed up on scene. And then in a lot of these cases, about 5 to 10 to 15 minutes later, once dispatch got on the horn, once Andy Griffith was able to call Sarah in Mayberry, Sarah, connect me with it. Then they were able to follow the FBI to wherever they were doing the raids. So he says, today's raids by state and federal law enforcement happened because our state agencies caught irregular behavior and reported it.
Nope.
And that's how the system is supposed to work.
Nope.
And our agencies will keep at it as long as there are fraudsters to put behind bars. Great. That's real special. FBI Director Kash Patel was having none of this. And responded, come again. Look, dude. This FBI and DOJ, with our DHS partners, drafted and executed every search warrant today. By which I mean, I don't recall seeing a lot of Minnesota officials' signatures on the paper. I don't remember, you guys, if you didn't know this, state police agencies, state attorneys general, state offices of attorneys general, and then the office of governor can request, there is a private line, a private inbox, if you will, a little fax number just for these groups to call the FBI and request a raid or further investigation. The Department of Justice has people that they hire and pay way too much money every year to sit by the phone and ask, I wonder if Tim Walz is going to call me today and ask for help. But what's kind of funny? Tim Walz, survey says, times Tim Walz called and asked the federal government for help. No examples of this whatsoever. And the rest of the country knows this, so a very good riddance to Tim Walz. Now, there are a couple of other major FBI raids that have happened in the last couple of days. For example, in northwestern Indiana, 22 separate indictments delivered on an alleged illegal gambling ring out of northwest Indiana. Just for the record here, CBS Skywatch points out one of these places was over Gino's Steakhouse in Merrillville, Indiana, where I have eaten before. And I got to tell you, the steak there was not that good to also house an illegal gambling ring. You're going to be a restaurant that houses an illegal gambling ring. Pro tip, be a good restaurant. So, just throwing it out there. Maybe if you're serving up shoe leather and calling it steak, don't expect the Federal Bureau of Investigation to be real nice when they come around serving warrants. So that 2 restaurants, 1 home in northwest Indiana, that's a pretty sizable raid. Also, the first major Federal Bureau of Investigation operation, this one called Steadfast Promised. It's a first ever kind durational campaign, quote, to crush violent crime on tribal lands, end quote. This is a really big issue. A lot of people don't realize, but on a lot of Native American reservations and tribal lands in the United States and Canada, crime is every single kind of rampant. And again, when you create permanent welfare states, that tends to happen. But according to the director of the FBI, we now have over 400 agents and staff dedicated to working Indian country, adding 3 more safe street task forces for a total of 29, that being the FBI's largest ever commitment. Kicking off the campaign on the ground in Montana with a dozen of our SACs responsible for over 17 states with tribal lands. What does this mean? It means that a lot of the liberal pearl clutching for years, you can't go in and do things on tribal land. Those are tribal lands. You remember Billie Eilish talking about homes on stolen lands and all that crap. Well, they are in the United States. They did, in fact, lose the war. And so, therefore, as conquered lands, by the way, I say this as a member of a Cherokee tribe, not the Elizabeth Warren kind. Yeah, they're Americans too. And so the FBI can go in and keep citizens in that area safe, just like the rest of the country. What's good for the goose is good for the teepee. You know what I mean? So that brings us over to the last and probably one of the most sizable announcements from the FBI. A global task force between, and what can only be described as the most unprecedented of unprecedented cooperation between the FBI, the Dubai police, and the Chinese Ministry of Public Security. So if you don't know this, India and China, they're really not the best of buds. No, not necessarily. The UAE and China, also not the best of buds. Also, the UAE and India, also not the best of buds. And then the United States. So these four countries worked together to carry out a series of interagency, and I'm sorry, there also were a couple of other international agencies involved in here. Thailand was also a part of this, for example. There were a lot of cities and localities across the country, but led by the four cornerstone partners here, being the United States, the UAE, the Indian government, the Chinese government, tackling all of these quote-unquote pig butchering crypto fraud rings which prey on Americans. Americans have lost millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars, on individuals calling them up and using AI, which is becoming more prevalent these days, or just the old classic Indian, hello, I'd like to talk to you about your car insurance or your computer virus. That kind of crap has cost Americans a lot of money, and there were 276 arrests and at least 9 scam center takedowns. Now, I also have some word that this also involved some of the YouTubers that spend their days trolling scammers and getting into their systems and giving them a lot of grief. That's really impressive. And I would love to see some of this stuff in the future. Now, I'm a sucker for contracting. You probably know that if you've ever tuned into the show before. But when it comes to the investigation of criminal activity, if there are individuals who want to work with law enforcement, not the SPLC, but law enforcement, to investigate, to infiltrate, and to cause a lot of grief to those who are costing, especially American seniors, but not just relegated to that age group anymore, millions of dollars a year, excellent. And that's a good thing to see. So that brings us over to another big piece of the news today. So you may recall that yesterday the big news was that the Supreme Court of the United States struck down the racial gerrymandering part of the Voting Rights Act from the Biden administration. So essentially there was this carved out little special thing that's been in the United States congressional districting rules for a while, not just since the Biden administration, but reinforced during the Biden administration, which has created a very bizarre racially segregated voting allowance for only some groups of people. So the idea was that if you had a large enough group of people that you could say were black or brown, and again, no one is really quite sure what brown means, including the people who say brown people, as though if you had in southern Arkansas, for example, you had a community that was 2/3 Hispanic and then also from New Delhi, that therefore that group contains enough brown people, whatever, in order to have their own special brown voting district. Well, not only is that racial segregation and really, really gross, the Supreme Court has now ruled, how about no? And of course, this came out of the lawsuit from Louisiana, which is where you will see quite the incredible voting districts that they had created that looks a lot like a dolphin throwing up. That's not allowed to be a thing anymore. And this has swept into a full-scale panic attack from those in the Democrat part of the aisle. Because they have now pointed out, wait a minute, if Democrats held 24 seats that were specially designed to be these little wonderful, racial, magical whatevers, if all of these states across the American South rewrite or redistrict this stuff across, then it could see Republicans gaining 12 of those previously 24 held Democrat seats. Now, some saying, well, there's been a really weird line from a lot of people on the left who have all of a sudden come out to just announce, well, we should just ban gerrymandering altogether. And to those dear people, including some of you fine folks in the comments, I would like to ask you, how are you going to do this? If your answer is, well, we need to kick it to an independent committee, hey, cool. Who decides who the independent committee is? And who decides who's on it? And who decides what independent means? Because that's just as partisan. We see all this with the Virginia Congressional amendment, by the way. They didn't just ask Virginia voters, hey, do you want to redistrict the state? They're like, do you believe in democracy and fairness? And do you always promise to I before E? Well, then you'll like redistricting. Vote yes in the box. And it was complete. And by the way, that might actually be one of the 4 reasons why that Virginia congressional measure gets tossed out quicker than a bad burger at Wendy's. So, I mean, in this particular instance, the bleeding and the crying and the fear-mongering isn't really resonating with Americans as much, because Democrats, all the way from Obama to Rahm Emanuel to Hakeem Jeffries, who we'll get to in a second, to old Chuckle Schumer, they were just up in arms in celebration over the Virginia redistricting and gerrymandering. So now there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of angst, some dyspepsia, maybe a call for redistricting some Pepto-Bismol over to them. And there's a couple of ways that we see this that are just, that's really funny. So first of all, there's a new call to just bring in all of the gerrymandering. So they're going to take places like Illinois and California. We showed you those pictures on the show yesterday, where they're just going to remove all Republican seats forever. Another push that is growing is not just to make Washington, D.C. a state, but to make Washington, D.C. 8 states. So a big push on social media at the moment is to, and I quote, if Democrats actually want to fight back after the Voting Rights Act ruling, again, which just says you can't draw voting districts based on race. Holy crap. Quote, they should split Washington, D.C. into 8 different wards and then admit each of those as states, which would mean that you would then have an additional 16 senators. To codify voting rights reform into the Constitution, no more half measures. So I do appreciate that when the Supreme Court ruled, hey, you can't racially segregate voting districts, that the left's response to this has been, we have to rig everything forever. Sweet baby Moses in a basket. That's a pretty wild thing to suggest. Now it comes in other flavors, shapes, and sizes. Republicans are now moving forward and saying, all right, fine, we're going to do some redistricting. Well, then let's do some redistricting. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee has put forward this all red map of Tennessee. Now, again, you may notice that when Republicans gerrymander, it just looks like blocks, like chunks, regional chunks. And then when Democrats gerrymander, I think we actually have this photo queued up here. Yeah, the Illinois or the California example. Again, Republicans just look like blocky regions, and then the Democrats look like you gave a schizophrenic toddler a blue-colored pencil. So, interesting of note for sure. This brings us to some of the melting down, because there was quite a bit of melting down today from Cory Booker, senator from New Jersey. He's got the angry eyes out. He's popped out the normal ones. He's put in the angry ones. He's taken a Midol. He's not going to poop for 36 hours. He's going to yell at the Senate. It's going to be exciting. Here he was just, I guess, giving us all the business over this today.
We had a civil war in this country, and in the aftermath of that, we had a brief period of black representation of all throughout the South when there were fair elections, equal voting power. The first black senators and congresspeople came, and then within a...
Came from where? Came from what party, Corey? What party did the first 23 Republicans I obviously letting it slip there. The first 23 black individuals in Congress come from? Oh, that would be the Republican Party. Oh, yes.
Decade, all of that black representation was eviscerated because those southern states moved to suppress blacks' voting rights and redraw maps so that it was impossible for a black person to again be elected, even though some of those states had upwards of 40+% African Americans.
By the way, this argument, not technically true. Not actually, in fact, what happened at this level. There were a lot of state legislature fights. You can read all of the history of the civil rights movement in the 20th century. You can. It's all open. A lot of you lived through this particular stuff. Making the argument that Republicans want to take away the right to racially segregate districts, which, by the way, is how this ended up. You ended up seeing states take the rules that the South, through Jim Crowism, had created to racially segregate districts, and then the South ended up using those to isolate Democrat districts, especially when they no longer found they could win elections. It's called the last gasp of the Democrat state legislatures. It's a documented thing, really big during the Nixon administration. It was one of the things that was constantly trying to be slapped down from the LBJ era. And to see this now, we've got Cory Booker coming out here and doing a little dance over this. Again, my dude, you are the party that is fighting to racially segregate districts.
And then a movement began. And over the next century, African Americans returned to Congress. In fact, the first One from North Carolina came in the 90s. The black senators started returning. I'm the fourth black elected in the United States history after Barack Obama, number 3. And we started to finally, since the battles and fights, blacks and whites joining together in a rainbow coalition.
So first of all, 2 colors don't make a rainbow.
Establish what we have today, the Voting Rights Act. And what the Supreme Court has now done is eviscerate that act. And what you see southern states openly talking about doing now is eliminating black representation, to disenfranchising African-American voters by drawing creative districts that completely take away any kind of representation.
Nope. And here's why. Number one, because people in the South all still, in fact, have one vote, one person. And again, the argument that is made that all black people think the same and vote the same, and all brown people, whatever that means, think the same and vote the same, and therefore, because they are, and also it also suggests that that could never be in alignment with someone who happens to be white. So what you need to do is you need to create these ghettos. You need to create these pogroms. You need to create these special districts where you got black people, and we're going to fit all the black people into this one district because they could never vote for a white Republican or a white Democrat. Oh no. And also screw anyone else who's in that district who may not be black. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this plantation, we're going to create this, kind of a red line. Okay, we're going to create this mapped segregational area for the black people. And then they'll get their own special little token, they'll get their own special congressperson. Yeah, that's incredibly racist and garbage, and it deserves to be thrown out. Because it just so happens that maybe you living in any state across the country have more in common with someone living across the street from you than someone who is your same magical Pantone skin shade Sherman-Williams color living on the other side of the state. And so the Democrats are losing their mind. So Hakeem Jeffries, he really turns it up to 11 here. And I'm sorry, that's 11, not Roman numeral II, Ilhan Omar. Hakeem Jeffries decides, hey, you know what it's time to do? Threaten the Supreme Court of the United States.
In the new Congress, we're going to have to do something about this Supreme Court. And let me be very clear. Everything is on the table. Everything to deal with this corrupt MAGA majority that is issuing political.
So again, see, it's not just I disagree with them. I think they're wrong. I disagree with Karine Jean-Pierre, with Ketanji Brown Jackson. I think that she's wrong. I don't like Ketanji Brown Jackson. Do I think she's evil and corrupt? No. I think she's dumb. Do I think that she needs to be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanor? No, I don't think so. Now, do I think she should have ever been on the Supreme Court in the first place? Absolutely not. Insulting to her as well, given that she was chosen literally by the words of Joe Biden because she was a black woman. That was why she was chosen. Which, by the way, if George W. Bush would have been like, yeah, I'm choosing Condoleezza Rice because, she's a black woman. Good, sweet Lord. So in this instance, I got to be clear. Threatening anyone that you don't like by calling them corrupt and evil and they're ruining everything, that is the kind of rhetoric that incites assassination attempts. And this is why I'm very clear on the show whether I think someone is corrupt and evil or stupid or a waste of time or an egomaniac or whatever. Because how individuals are described and what they are lambasted for matters. It does. And it matters in the legal world too, because depending on which of those magical adjectives you might be holding public office, also determines, based on those actions, the kind of damages that might be brought to bear in a court of law. Now, that brings us over to, again, the Tennessee map. The President of the United States got out the old Truth Social. Said, I had a very good conversation with Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee this morning, wherein he stated that, quote, he would work hard to correct the unconstitutional flaw in the congressional maps of the great state of Tennessee. Likewise, all of the other political representatives of Tennessee have promised to do so. So he then expounds on a bunch of Republican policies that would be benefited by doing this. Now, this is where I would point out that in my dear, sweet, wonderful state of Indiana, that we had a state senator by the name of Jean Lysing, who said she wasn't going to vote to redistrict here because her grandson received a mass text that she believed was targeted at him. A mass text sent to 600 people in his phone book block is what kept the ancient Jean Lysing, who, by the way, I used to page for. And again, if I'm telling you, over a decade later, I used to page for her, then, that kind of stuff. So congratulations to Indiana. Again, Florida, it took them 2 days for Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida to redistrict there. So basically, you have two groups in the country right now. You have individuals who are willing to actually get out and do the stuff. And then you have people who are like, well, let's not be too hasty. What if someone calls me mean? I don't want to be called mean. I mean, sure, they're already calling you racist, bigoted, homophobic, ableist, LGBTQist, whatever. And no matter what word comes out of your mouth, they'll call you evil. But I mean, sure, yeah, you know, sit back, do nothing. That's excellent. That brings us over to good old Pete Hegseth in front of Congress today. So the Secretary of War, yesterday he was in front of the House of Representatives, which means it's committee time. And, you know, everybody loves, look, everyone enjoys a little bit of committee time. You get on C-SPAN, you throw some punches, you say, how long have you been beating your wife? And are you the devil now or later? And then the other person responds, no, I'm rubber, and Senator, you're glue. Beautiful. Everyone hates it. It's just garbage. So Pete Hegseth was at the House yesterday. Today, he was in front of the Senate. And I'm just very disappointed. I'm disappointed. Do you know why? Because I didn't get to see Secretary of War Pete Hegseth clock Mazie Hirono from Hawaii. I think that Mazie Hirono should be required to be in every single committee just so that you and I can laugh at her. Just being real level-headed here with you. Just man to camera. All right, so other than the fact that we didn't get any Mazie Hirono, we did get a couple of excellent things. You say, Tony, you're introducing this like an entertainment segment. You're not introducing this segment like an esteemed Secretary of War discussing rational policy with congressmen and women. Yeah, that's correct, because it's not. Congressional committees are just wrestling for those who can't afford pay-per-view. And it's much lower quality wrestling. It's Temu wrestling on C-SPAN 3 or ESPN 8, the Ocho. So let's get started. Right off the bat, Hegseth knows that's what this is. Again, Hegseth, former news host as well as his time in the military. He knows, based on his programming, when something is cut for the cameras. So when Senator Elisa Slotkin from Michigan is, you know, putting on the makeup and strutting out there to sing beautiful ballads from Wicked to perform for the TVs, Hegseth calls her out on it. I'm going to level with you. I enjoyed this greatly.
We've never had to do that. So Secretary Hegseth, if the president, who regrets not signing that executive order to the then SecDef in 2020, asks you to seize ballots or voting machines in states during the 2026 election, will you stand up for the Constitution and say no, or will you?
Okay, so you may remember this because we've been here before. We've been here before. She had a slightly different, yet still awkward, almost normal haircut a while ago. You know, different Hillary Clinton blue blazer. In fact, I'm a little uncomfortable at how close this blazer matches hers. And she asked Hegseth, remember this was back during the confirmation hearing? She said, Pete, if Trump asks you to mow down innocent women and children, if he asks you to go to the VA and open up a can of Agent Orange, Secretary Hegseth, if Trump comes up and asks you to bring about the tribulation, would you do it? Or would you be good instead? And I believe the question that Hegseth responded with was, are you retarded or just pretending? So here we have Elisa Slotkin, who really misses being like the darling of the Democrat Party for about 5 minutes. Remember, there was that time where she was super rebuttal woman for Trump, and then it turned out she couldn't speak, which you can see now because, again, she's trying to read a question that it's pretty basic. We're here. We've been here before. It's a bad rerun. We've got Marty McFly going, hey, I've seen this one. It's a classic. Hegseth doesn't miss a beat.
Salute and do his bidding.
Senator, I didn't get a chance to answer the front part of your question, which, there was a lot of deferred maintenance under the Biden administration that needed to be addressed.
Which, by the way, good start. You asked a question, and then you went on for 3 days. Now, look, as an interview host, you guys have seen me do this exact same thing. I'm absolutely guilty of it. You're like, Tony, get to the question, man. You've been talking to this person that you're interviewing for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, even the apostles are tired and need to go to bed, man. Like, get to the question. I'm guilty of this. It's fair. But at the congressional hearing, I mean, that's kind of run of the mill. That's at the top of the Arby's menu for the congressional team.
Because the world was in chaos when President Trump was elected.
Just address the election issue, please.
Well, again, that's
the most important thing. It's what's happening.
It's yet another gotcha hypothetical, which is your specialty.
It's not. We had
and
an executive order
under
from
the Biden
that your
administration in
predecessor had to
2024.
hold. It's not a hypothetical. I refuse to accept. You give that answer all the time. You and I have done this dance before. Get over it, okay? In 2020, he's the president.
She got out the Gavin Newsom hands. I didn't notice this. So originally I was listening to this. Producer Josiah was like sending me moments, and so I opened up the kind of the live feed and was listening. I didn't see she got out the. She was. I love it. I love it so much because you can't see her doing the kick line chorus from the can also underneath the desk. And Hegseth laughs at it because, again, it's also performative. When you gonna
President, your boss, the guy you're performing for right now, told the journalists this year that he wished he signed that executive order to your predecessor. And your predecessor said publicly, thank God, we didn't actually go forward with it. What are you going to do? You're the guy here in the seat. It's not hypothetical. Tell the American people, will you deploy?
By the way, the answer to this should have been him putting on a pair of aviators and then just going, I am that guy. And then like some AC/DC kicks in. I mean, since we're all doing performative stuff, we might as well do the Tony Stark scene from Iron Man 2, right?
Deploy the uniformed military to our polls to collect voter rolls or machines.
Are you accusing me of performing? Because you're performing for cable news right now.
But
just
Mr.
answer the
Secretary,
question.
we have very
It's a hypothetical. By the way, in 2024, under the Biden administration, 15 states did deploy
Under
troops
their
to polling
governor's
stations.
authority, when their governors asked for it.
What did Joe Biden say about that?
That's fundamentally, I don't think anything, because he needed them for cybersecurity and.
Nope. The man said no, and the Republicans were trying to incite civil war. I remember that. You remember that because I covered all of the National Guard men going down to the border every diggity-dong-dang day. So, beautiful. Did you enjoy the performativeness? Was it great? You need a moment for intermission? Oh, no. You can't just leave right now. You're going to miss Jackie Rosen, who I'm pretty sure was almost cast to be the evil little frog lady in Harry Potter. Jackie Rosen telling Hegseth that using the term Pharisees, is anti-Semitic, which, no.
Mr. Secretary, you compare journalists, you compare us, you compare so many to Pharisees. It's a problematic and historically weaponized term that casts Jewish communities as hypocritical or morally corrupt.
No, it's not. It's not meant for Jewish Pharisees. It's not. When Jesus Christ, the King of the Jews, Yeshu bar Joseph, that would be a Jew from Nazareth, was really, really annoyed with the spiritual leaders of the day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, okay? And he was really annoyed with how they were so legalistic that they were lecturing a man who was healed from lameness for taking up his bed, for rolling up the bedroll and walking home. Christ mocked the Pharisees, and it became a thing. If you are hypocritical, it doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter what religion you're a part of, it enters the lexicon. Again, I'm just going to, since we're all just, throwing out little etymological, roots of words here, I've heard Jackie Rosen say that the Americans have been gypped before. The word gyp comes from the word gypsies. So is that all? That's all very, very problematic all of a sudden. Get out of here with your stupid, atheological, retarded nonsense.
On again and said it. Words matter.
You can hear him laughing
Words
because
matter. What you choose to say, how we choose to say it. How do you justify using this language as Secretary of Defense? Words matter. It's a historically hurtful term.
Guys, I'm not even going to play any more of that right now. Here's why this bothers me very, very deeply. There is a serious series of things that should be asked that are important to you and to me. I know there are a lot of you out there who disagree with my personal take on Operation Epic Fury and the Iran war. Good, that's fine, awesome. I'm glad that we have a country where you should be able to ask questions. The legislative branch is what is supposed to hold the executive branch accountable in the carrying forth of its laws. And because the state legislature was supposed to draw congressional districts for the House of Representatives, and the state legislature was supposed to elect senators, this was a way for the state governments to check the executive branch and how their priorities were being carried out. So when instead of this, and if you were a Democrat and you're watching this, maybe you even hate watching this. I don't know. You're like, man, this guy, this J.D. Vance lookalike, man, he's handsome, but I hate him. Whatever. then you and I can at least agree that that is a huge waste of time. And Republicans do this too. Wholly agree, understand, I'm right there with you. I can't stand it. I can't. The only reason I would ever run for Congress, the only reason that I would ever decide, you know what, the Indiana 6th Congressional really, really needs another bland white dude with a beard who has perfect pitch and a panache for frying a good steak. I just want to sit on committees and just ask them question to question to question. Because Americans do, in fact, deserve answers. You say, Tony, you're asking so much. Nobody's willing to do that. I disagree. Representative Brandon Gill did this just the other day. Gill's been on the show several times before. He's one of the youngest representatives in Congress right now. He's from Texas. Here is how you ask questions and get answers in a committee. And yes, by the way, you can ask leading questions. That's a thing you can do. But you should give time for the person to answer the question. You say, Tony, you're getting a little worked up about this. Absolutely. Because not only is it wasting your and my money, some of you have really good questions about Operation Epic Fury, about the blockade, about a number of things. Has anyone brought up that the Supreme Court of the United States, that Samuel Alito, that Brett Kavanaugh wrote in rebuking the tariff policies, that they said, hey, Trump, you can't basically do tariffs eternally on countries, but you do have a power of the executive. You can embargo a country with the Navy. What are we doing outside of Iran right now? Has anyone brought up that we are embargoing based on the reliant language of the Supreme Court in the exact manner? Is any senator talking about this right now? No. No one's asking, well, you're just seeing language. It's like, not like what you said, but it's like how you said it. It's like really problematic. Oh my God, Pete Hegseth, what are you doing? Stop it. Stop it. This isn't The View, Whoopi. Calm yourself. This is what a congressional committee absolutely should look like, though. Here's Brandon Gill.
You're an advocate for abortion, for abortion policy. What's your favorite type of abortion?
I am an advocate for patients having access to the full realm of reproductive health care.
But do you have a preferred method of abortion that you like?
I do not.
Let me read through a couple different methods, and I want to get your take on how much you like these. The first type is called a suction abortion. This is when the cervix is dilated and a strong suction, 29 times the power of a household vacuum cleaner, tears the baby's body apart and sucks it through the hose into a container. Do you prefer that method?
I stand by my former testimony.
That sounds kind of gross, doesn't it? Sounds pretty gruesome.
So do you see? Level-headed, asking her questions. Hey, you're a big abortion advocate. Just, I'm for reproductive health care, which means abortion. That's what, because again, when you say, okay, well, tell you what, all reproductive health care, pap smears, you want to talk about, expressing perhaps a tax write-off for OBGYNs. You want to, this has been, by the way, a tax-free, a tax moratorium on those in the gynecology and the obstetrics industries in those fields have been proposed by Republicans since the late 80s. How do you know this, Tony? Because on the freaking Cosby Show, Cliff Huxtable talked about this being Republican policy. So don't talk to me about reproductive. You're talking about abortion. We all understand it. The left wouldn't accept that. So he just calmly asks her, hey, well, then what's your favorite type? And she won't answer it. She won't even touch it because she knows how gross this is.
Do you agree? It does to me.
I stand by how I answered your question fully and accurately.
Okay, what about this one? This one is called dilation and curettage. After dilation of the cervix, a sharp looped knife is inserted into the uterus. The baby's body is cut into pieces and extracted, often by suction. Do you prefer that method?
What I believe we are here to talk about today is the FACE Act. We are not here to talk about the legality of abortion.
I'm asking you, you're a pro-abortion advocate. I'm asking if you prefer the dilation.
So, by the way, that's how you conduct a congressional committee. That goes on for another minute and a half. It's phenomenal. I encourage you to go on social media, onto Twitter especially. I think I have it reposted there. It's an excellent, excellent clip. Very, very well done. That's how it should be done. Now, last but not least, I want to show from today, Senator Jack Reed. Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island is the senior senator. He's been in office since 97. He is the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Also, may I point out, he's also a graduate of West Point, which is looking at this, man, I'm sorry. I know you're not supposed to. It's just bizarre. So here's what he gets really angry at Hegseth about. Again, there are questions that you should be asking. You should be. I mean, and not because I want to see anyone, left or right, populist, traditional conservative, libertarian, boxed into a corner. No, because I want the answers. I like the receipts. I like the answers. So when we're wasting time instead doing this.
I am a believer. I'm quite open in that, and our department allows for a multitude of faiths. So I don't know what you're suggesting. I've heard the likes of things that people like you suggest to try to smear my character, and I won't give into it.
No. I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, but broadcasting before the national religious broadcasters stressing the need for more Christianity in the military forces doesn't seem like a neutral position in which you tolerate and accept all religions.
Which, by the way, I'm sorry, as a Christian, yes, I want there to be more Christians. You guys not know how religion works? Again, the whole tenet of Christianity, again, going back to the Gospels, quote, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Later on in Matthew, for there was none other gospel given among men whereby we must be saved. Like, it's very specific. Christians believe. And by the way, if you don't believe this, you're not a Christian. If you're a Christian who believes that there's like a bunch of magical different ways to get to heaven, you're not a Christian, because the Bible is extremely explicit about this. So if Hegseth gets up and says, hey, yeah, I want there to be more Christians in the military. I do. I think if you're out there and you're a Christian, you should be serving in the military, which, by the way, that's not a bad thing to do. That's not a bad thing at all. There's nothing in anywhere in there that's bad. This is the really rough part, though. So that clip that I just shared with you, that was shared by some left-wing individual, and then he cuts off the rest of the clip. So the rest of the clip is when Jack Reed says one of the most egregious things I think I've heard in a Senate committee so off-topic like this, and that's a high bar to clear.
Intense interest in Christianity, in nationalism, and in not recognizing the talents of women and non-white gentlemen, and that's the wrong direction.
I don't know what you're insinuating, Senator, but I am not ashamed of my faith in Jesus Christ.
Well, you shouldn't be ashamed.
And if you want to shame
me
for it, go ahead.
I mean, I've listened to this a couple of times. I'm trying to hear closely because I'm hearing
intense interest.
I don't know what you're insinuating, Senator, but I am not ashamed of my faith in Jesus Christ.
Well, you shouldn't be ashamed.
If you want to,
I'm not quite sure there whether he's saying you shouldn't be ashamed or should be ashamed. Either way, here, what are we doing? What are we doing? What is this all? Oh, well, you're a nationalist and you hate women and you're really evil. Again, the idea that we're just going to make this a time when it's a very serious series of questions, we're wasting it like this, is in fact a huge waste of time. Big, silly nonsense. On to some of the international and foreign policy news. Josiah says shouldn't. Okay, good. I sure hope it shouldn't, because if it should, that's gross even for Jack Reed. But wasting our time nonsensically, excellent stuff out of the Senate as usual. That'll bring us over to my interesting updates for sure on the international side. So the Department of Justice charged the governor of Sinaloa. So Sinaloa is one of the Mexican states. It's up on the western side of the country, and that is where the Sinaloa cartel does a bunch of its operations. And the Department of Justice under the United States has come to the conclusion that that governor is working with the cartels. Now, again, you and I might say, duh, but in Mexico, the Mexican government has been entirely corrupted by the cartels. And Claudia Sheinbaum, finding out that the Department of Justice, under, yet again, Todd Blanche, has charged the governor of Sinaloa with corruption for working with the cartel. Well, Claudia Sheinbaum threw a hissy fit on stage in front of God and everybody. Here, I'll bring this up on screen, and then I'll do a little el translación.
Si no existen pruebas claras, es evidente que el objetivo de estas imputaciones por parte del Departamento de Justicia es político. Como Presidenta de la República,
as President of the Republic, my position on these events is the truth and sovereignty, that is to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen to her anymore. I can't stand it. She says that there's any conclusive or irrefutable evidence, then I would like to see it But so far, it appears that there is nothing in this that finds elements that constitute a crime. It must proceed according to the law under our jurisdiction, which in the Mexican law means just letting them get away with everything forever. No investigation. She's upset because she's in bed with the cartels. So Claudia Sheinbaum threw an absolute hissy fit today before the Mexican people, just kicking and stamping. This was sent to me by a good friend of the show, Julio Rosas. I will say it is a little bizarre when you are making the case that you are not in bed with the Sinaloa cartel to come out and say that any charges or investigation on North America against one of the governors of one of the Estados Unidos is inherently political. So Sinaloa Governor Ruben Rocha Moya, along with other current and formal officials, have been charged by the Department of Justice for corruption and a drug trafficking conspiracy due to allegedly working with the Sinaloa cartel. So remember how we have talked about before on international matters that the United States was able to take care of a lot of the Iranian regime leadership, and the Israeli government was able to take care of a lot of the Iranian regime leadership because they didn't believe in like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. I guess it was haram or something, because they would always go meet in person. And then we would just slap a little AGM missile just right, boom, a little tomahawk right into the center of that room. The drug cartels have the opposite problem. The drug cartels believe, I'm using Signal. My messages are encryptido. No, they're not. And it turns out the FBI, the NSA, and other intelligence agencies, not just us along the Five Eyes, have been able to crack a lot of the cartel communications for a while. And something has been rather weird to witness over the last 5 years. So over the last 5 years, we have seen individuals all the way from the lowest street level of crime to the highest echelons of power get really lax in their security. So you know how we would maybe imagine, kind of the classic, kind of a Law and Order kind of investigation where you got to decrypt, okay, this code name is Chicharrones, and then this code name is Drop Off Man, and then this code name he's the Eagle Man, and then this guy is Lizard Eye. All right, we got to decode and decrypt. People aren't doing that anymore. Over the last 5 years, people are just calling each other by their full first and last name on these encrypted chats, thinking we're never going to get caught. The Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, has just found the cartel members openly communicating in a corrupted fashion just with the governor of Sinaloa. Partly because they think no one can touch them, but also partly because social media and the broader technology use right now has created a system in which people think they can just say whatever and nothing's ever going to happen to them. We see it at home here, obviously, with the assassination threats to the President of the United States and the language surrounding it. So, interesting, for sure. That brings us over to the current situation in Iran. Now, I've already let the cat out of the bag that it appears the Supreme Court of the United States has provided a lot of the language to the president's office regarding the current blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And so far, the Pakistani plan to open up 6 little magical land routes, a little, Pakistani revere, 1 if by land, 2 if by, that kind of a thing. It's not working very well at all because the United States has said, hey, what if I just throw you to Afghanistan and, you're no longer with us? Who knows? So that's already starting to fall apart. Enter in the most important international figure that we could find, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. And the crowd goes mild. So you may remember that right at the beginning of the Iranian conflict, that Friedrich Merz came out and said, this is very bad, and we're not going to do anything. And then Trump said, you might want to come get your oil in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Germans said, nein, we'll not do that. And then a couple of weeks went by, and the Iranians announced a ceasefire before the IRGC overrode that and recalled that foreign minister not to be seen in public, and now looking a little bit thinner than he was. But anywho, then the Germans, as soon as the ceasefire was announced, said, hey, we're ready to send some boats down to the old Strait of Hormuz and escort our stuff through. And then the ceasefire ended because, the And all of a sudden, Friedrich Merz came out and said, no, we're not going to do anything. We're looking at diplomatic options. So I don't know if you flip a German strudel as much as you do an American pancake, but man, this is some flip-flopping that would make the first campaign season of Obama blush. That's some major flip-floppiness right there. Old Navy would sell that cheap for summer footwear. That's how bad those flip-flops are. Sorry,
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, so today, German Chancellor Merz, he got out there and said, hey, now we decided we're committing to ending things again. And kind of changes how he's talking about it in the middle of it.
Sicherheit. Und genauso, es ist ein Beitrag zu einer erneuerten transatlantischen
contribution to renewed transatlantic partnership, which means I need that Donald Trump not to pull troops out of Germany because we can't handle Russia on our own. And also American troops bring a lot of money into Germany. There's an entire economy built around Ramstein. All right. No, mon Fräulein, you can't just throw the United States out. I'm afraid it won't go too very well there. So he says, I've emphasized several times, and in this spirit, we are committed to quickly ending the Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And all of a sudden, and why he was saying this, by the way, the market bumped. It was like, oh, wow. We are committed to ending the blockade? Really? Are we going to see the German colony of Yemen? What's going on here? That's interesting stuff. What's going on? And then he clarifies this and the market went right back down. If the relevant conditions are met, then Germany is prepared to engage militarily to guarantee the freedom of the sea lanes. But before we get there, though, I've advocated for increasing the pressure of sanctions and pressure. Diplomacy again. We're going to send 2 negotiators. Okie dokie. That's real special there, Friedrich Merz. That's super and duper. Love it very, very much. So anyway, all of this stuff said, let's dive into the president's response here. He says, the Chancellor of Germany should spend more time on ending the war with Russia and Ukraine, where he has been totally ineffective, and fixing his broken country, especially immigration and energy. Less time on interfering with those that are getting rid of the Iran nuclear threat, thereby making the world, including Germany, a safer place. President Donald John Trump. So, good stuff. I mean, we're continuing to watch this. Now, again, gas prices are continuing to go up. I've seen the full spectrum of panic setting in among a smaller group. And to be clear, 2 months in, that is still a remarkably short time. Already, though, seeing the United Arab Emirates leaving OPEC means that on the other side of this, gas prices are going to fall pretty significantly because the OPEC sets quotas, meaning that you can't just pump all of the oil out to satisfy the market need. Well, if the UAE is leaving and selling its own oil without, putting any kind of a production cap on it, another major oil competitor, that's going to sink oil prices lower in the future. So we'll get to some of those updates here tomorrow when I am back home from our nation's capital and to kind of what you can expect over the next couple of weeks. Right before we round out our coverage today, I did want to take a second to talk about the nutcases in the media. So we haven't really had a lot of time this week to focus on how media is handling things. So first of all, CNN did something, I don't think this was CNN's fault, to be very fair here, right? They invited Representative Seth Moulton on from the Northeast. So this is the same senator who there's a weird online joke about him not caring about demons and Jimmy Johns. That Gen Z humor is strange. I'm still struggling to understand it as a millennial. Anywho, this particular Representative Seth Moulton, he goes on and you can see the concern in the eyes of the CNN anchor here who's interviewing him about the Voting Rights Act. So I would like you to pay attention, obviously, to the crazy things this man is about to say, because what he is suggesting is wartime execution for Hegseth. It's Democrat Representative Seth Moulton, all right? And look at the anchor's face as she just realizes he's saying this to her. I honestly feel bad for her. Here we go.
Do you believe that
the Secretary of Defense is guilty of war crimes?
Absolutely. I mean, he's clearly behind the operation to shoot all these boats in the Caribbean when it's very unclear that we actually have any confirmation that these so-called narco-terrorists, a term the administration invented to justify this action, are even on the boats. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of evidence that these are just fishermen, you know, getting jobs, piloting these boats, trying to feed their families. There's been press reporting on some of these individuals who've been killed, who are clearly not war criminals. And on top of that, we then have the strike where they came back and hit it again, a double tap, just purely to kill these survivors who were clinging to wreckage.
So she wants to jump in, and because again, if you look at the chyron on the screen, that layer of text there, that's the chyron. I also found out that CNN's production team apparently calls them fonts, which is interesting, and you didn't ask for that bit of trivia, but I just found out the other day. Anywho, on the chyron it says, Democrat confronts Hegseth over Iran threats. Quote, that's murder. So he's been brought on to ask about things related to Iran. Seth Moulton here of Massachusetts, he decides to make this all about like the Venezuelan narco terror boats here. And you can see again, the expression on the interviewer's face, which by the way, I have been in this boat where you ask a question and you don't get an answer. Instead, you get something else. It is another layer of panic. Just to level through, there's a little internal panic in which they also start saying crazy whack-a-mole Yahoo like crazy stuff right in the middle of the question, which is what he's doing. Because what he's going to say is that that Hegseth personally ordered the United States Navy to kill all survivors. Let there be no survivors, Mr. Bond. That kind of crap.
You know, it's interesting, Aaron, another historical analogy. Back in World War II,
you can see the head pivot of Aaron go, oh no. Back in World War II, gee, I wonder where this is going to go.
The Allies tried Nazi submarine captains for doing this exact same thing. And guess what the conclusion was? They got executed.
That is entirely made up. There was one Nazi naval officer, one U-boat officer, in fact, who was tried on this particular matter. It was not extremely explicitly common. And also, yes, this individual was executed, but this idea where he's just like picking up, oh, well, remember, we executed all of the naval officers of the Nazi regime for just gunning down survivors. Guys, there were so the reason that you don't do this between two armed conflicts and parties is that there are often, in a major conflict, the other side has your sailors as well. Right? Because the idea is you collect the people that you capture, you put them in a prisoner of war camp until the end of the war, you do exchanges throughout the war to try to lower some of the temperature, you put them out of action, and then there's a whole series of rights and things that come in. The Red Cross is supposed to get access. That was back before the Red Cross was garbage. You know, you were supposed to do all of these things. It was actually the duty of the soldiers or the sailors there to escape. There's a whole entire field of study regarding prisoner of war stuff. Just making it up and going, you know what? We executed all of the people who did what Hegseth did.
Listen to that, Mr. Secretary.
And you can see Aaron going, oh goodness, oh my, oh boy. So I do. That's one of those situations that I really do feel bad. The last on the list here, though, is Jennifer Welch. So Jennifer Welch, again, I've said this before, every lady over on the left looks like one of three things. They either look like, Jennifer Welch, angry, Botoxed to like the nth degree. Basically, they look, you know what I mean? The basic blonde, angry, menopausal lady on the left. Again, I've said this, right-wing ladies, they age gracefully. Independent ladies, they age gracefully. And there is such kind and wonderful diversity in many different wonderful shapes and sizes. For the ladies on the left, though, you get one of three things. You get the Nicole Wallace, Jennifer Welch Botox look. You get Pumbaa from The Lion King. Or you get Michael Scott from The Office with grayer hair and glasses. Those are your three kinds. They're no more, no less. So the angry, menopausal, left-wing blonde lady section of the party has gotten really upset. Why? Because Erica Kirk is no longer just sitting there and kind of taking punches on the chin from Candace Owens. And saying, look, you know, you've gone around saying that I killed my husband for ages. We're not going to put up with that. And then Candace came out and said, no, I never said that. And then people were like, hey, look at these screenshots. And to be fair, it took Candace a while to get through those because Candace can't read. But this isn't about Candace Owens, this is actually about the wild things after Erica Kirk had said this from Jennifer Welch and then the cackling lady that she has right next to her. Check it out. So here they are laughing at the widow. You have Jennifer Welch who dressed like Erica Kirk in black, which, by the way, I thought people were mad at her for not dressing in black for mourning. The quadruple standard here, it's kind of funny. But starting by just laughing at the widow, it's a move. It's a move. Let's see what these two hags have to say.
How would you feel? How would you feel if the President of the United States said he wanted to wipe out an entire population? How would you feel?
Well, he didn't say he wanted to wipe out an entire population. Not even close. But, okay, Jan.
If your husband said because he's famous, he can grab him by the pussy, what would Jesus do?
Again, making up things. And by the way, when I say making up things here, who in the world, when have I ever heard Erica or Charlie, back when he was alive, when did he ever accept or like nod off on like gross things that Trump has said in his past? I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I think the words from Charlie directly on this particular topic, because he was always more pro-Trump at the time, than I was. And in these conversations, it would essentially be, well, I mean, no one excuses him for that kind of behavior. And that was a very early on conversation, because the idea that we're going to take Donald Trump and hold him up as like the prince of virtue, no one's making that argument. So we're building straw men is essentially what this is.
What would Jesus do to the black pilot? How would you feel if your husband, President of the United States, was an adjudicated rapist? How would you feel? No, sweetheart. I do remember the very top of that jury. I remember the very top line. It was like, do we find that Trump has raped? Nope. The box would check nope by all of the jurors. No, sorry. About that. How would you feel?
Okay, so this is what they have. This is their counter. This is what they have brought to the table for the election. This is the new side of the left-wing media. You have the angry, screaming, Botoxed nutcase lady. There you go. Good luck to you over there on the left with that. So excellent, stellar stuff. And why do I show you that at the end? I get asked if we stay away from it kind of for too long, kind of what is kind of the theme over from the left side of the aisle in these kind of conversations. And the answer to that particular instance is always the same. They are growing more unhinged as what they have tried to imitate from the right hasn't worked. There's no actual comedy. There's nothing effective. There's no point that's being made. There's nothing that is being suggested that's turning into policy. So, for example, when you have an individual like Hassan Piker, for instance, or David Pakman, who come out and they pitch these insane ideas, they don't actually get anywhere other than inspiring direct and open violence. They don't. They're chanted at protests, but you actually don't see them being made into bills. Now, I will be quite clear with you. There are a couple of representatives and senators' offices who do tune into the show. We're thrilled to have them. And I spend a lot of my time talking about policy for various states because I'm in flyover country, and I happen to think that the kind of laws that are passed impact people here. That's growing. I mean, our audience has been growing for a reason. And it's partly because that people would rather have the not pandery nonsense, which that is. And they would just have, again, everyone's taste and style is different. But the whole fake it till you make it, but like imitating what you think the right is good at, that's not going to change things in the midterms. Now, we are about out of time for today. I have to catch a wonderful flight to the worst place on earth. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. We will be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern for a roundup of the day's news from our wonderful Indiana studio. Again, God willing, this is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.